Regularly scheduled programming will not be seen at this time in order to bring you the following WTAE-TV special presentation. This is a live Commitment 2000 special, the Pennsylvania U.S. Senate Democratic debate.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Baker.
And I'm Janelle Stelson. Pennsylvania's primary is next Tuesday, April 4th. Democratic voters will be selecting a candidate to run against U.S. incumbent Senator Rick Santorum, the Republican.
And we put out 6 chairs tonight, and 6 candidates showed up here for our live debate. We are coming to you live from Millersville University in Lancaster County.
And we'd like to introduce you now to the candidates. They are Tom Foley from Dauphin County. Mr. Foley served as Pennsylvania's Secretary of Labor and Industry. He has also worked for the United States Labor Department. He is married and has 3 sons.
Phil Berg is from Lafayette Hill in Montgomery County. He is a lawyer, a business owner as well. Mr. Berg is an outspoken opponent of taxpayer-funded sports stadiums in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. He served for 8 years as Deputy Attorney General here in the state of Pennsylvania. He has 2 children.
Ron Klink from Westmoreland County is currently in his 4th term in the United States House of Representatives. He is a member of the House Commerce Committee. He is married and has 2 children, a teenage son and a teenage daughter.
Bob Robner is an attorney in Bucks and Montgomery counties, and he served as an assistant district attorney, also as a state senator. In fact, while he was in the state senate, he was a sponsor of the bill that created the Pennsylvania Lottery. He is married. They got 5 kids, a couple of grandkids in there, too.
Allison Schwartz is a state senator from Philadelphia and Montgomery County. In the state senate, she's worked on Pennsylvania's health insurance program for children and also the problem of violence in schools. She is married and has 2 sons in college.
Murray Levin is a lawyer from Wynwood. He has 2 children in college, a son and a daughter, and he's taught a couple of courses in college as well, at Harvard, at Haverford, and he's known for doing pro bono legal work for organizations including the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
Now, before we get to the questioning of the candidates, we'd like to introduce you to our co-moderator for this evening, Dr. Terry Madonna from Millersville University. He's going to explain the rules of engagement for tonight's forum.
Hi Janelle, hi Scott, hi everybody, and welcome to the campus of Millersville University. We are delighted to sponsor this Senate forum this evening. My task for the moment is very simple. I get to explain the rules of engagement. Quite simply, we hope to have a free and candid discussion of the issues. Janelle, Scott, and I will intermittently ask questions. We will also ask questions submitted in advance by students and by the audience. At the end of the forum, we'll have a 1-minute presentation by the candidates in the order of a draw. And now, Scott, Janelle?
All right, Professor Madonna, good job with the rules. We'll make you the enforcer.
We begin tonight with some of the toughest issues facing Democratic voters as they go to the primary on Tuesday. By the luck of the draw, we will start with Tom Foley. And perhaps the biggest question Democratic voters are asking, can you beat Senator Rick Santorum?
Great question, and the question, and one that does unite everybody here. We think he's the wrong guy on the job. I can beat Rick Santorum for 2 reasons. One, I think I have the breadth of experience at the state level, at the national level, and at the international level to really take some credibility down to Washington. But 2, and I think most importantly, I can attract votes all over the state of Pennsylvania. I've proven that in the past. And having served as Pennsylvania's Secretary of Labor and Industry, it really gave me the opportunity to travel literally in all 67 of our counties. And I think having that kind of a base where you can attract votes statewide is the key to beating Santorum.
Thank you, Mr. Foley. The same question I'm going to ask of you, Mr. Phil Berg.
Thank you. I am the people's candidate. I've been fighting for people for years. This is my 4th statewide race. People know me. I ran for governor in 1990 against Governor Casey. I'm proud to say in the fall I couldn't support the governor because of our stance on a certain issue, and then when he said he would sign legislation prohibiting abortion in the case of incest or rape, I called Barbara Hafer, the Republican, at Independence Hall and in Pittsburgh. I endorsed her. And I'm proud of that because I followed an issue, and so many politicians don't follow the issue. I call myself the people's candidate because I'm fighting right now. I'm suing Governor Riggs, the city of Philadelphia and the city of Pittsburgh over the $390 million they financed they loaned for the sports stadiums. It's corporate welfare. It's wrong. In Western Pennsylvania, people voted it down already. And then the state legislature, including Senator Allison Schwartz, who says she's for the family, passed that legislation which will cost each family in Pennsylvania $500. I'm a volunteer fireman. I'm active. I'm a lieutenant in my fire company. This is my 19th year. I'm a committee person. This is my 29th year. I'm a former county chairman. I'm a former deputy attorney general of Pennsylvania. I'm the only one that can go in Rick Santorum's face and beat him.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Berg. Mr. Ron Klink.
Well, I can beat Rick Santorum, and he knows it. And that's why in 1998 he virtually went in and ran a campaign for a fellow who ran against me for Congress. He put his entire apparatus in place in the Pittsburgh area, raising well over $1 million, and we beat him 2-1. That was the scrimmage. This is the game. And the reality is that I have a voting record from being in Congress for the last 8 years, battling against the Republicans, that is exactly the opposite of Rick Santorum on most of the issues that the panel here would consider important to working families. Beyond that, Rick Santorum barely won back in 1994. And he won in counties like Westmoreland County that's 2-1 Democratic. That's my home county. He's not going to win there. I'm going to beat Rick Santorum in his base, and we're going to beat him across this state. I need to be the nominee if we're going to get this guy out of office.
Thank you, Mr. Klink. Mr. Bob Rovner.
Janelle, thank you. I feel I'm the only Democrat who could beat Rick Santorum. Anyone who knows Bob Rovner knows I'm tenacious, I'm a hard worker, and I don't stop till I get the job done. I already defeated an incumbent state senator back in '70 when I was a young kid, only 26 running. Everyone said you can't win, but I did win, and I was the youngest, and I wanted to show the seniors that I was helping them. I was a poor kid, and I worked my way through college and law school. I'm a union person. My dad was a labor leader, and I'm the only I used to be the youngest state senator. Now I'm the only grandfather running for the U.S. Senate. So I know I'm the only one who's had a truly statewide campaign. I'm in every TV market. I have billboards all over the state. I'm on radio all over the state, and I've met almost 200,000 people in this campaign one-on-one. So everyone knows I'm tenacious. I'll get the job done, and I'm ready to go. I call Rick Santorum the alphabet senator because he supports special interests, the HMOs, the D.C. special interests, and he snuck in with the Newt Gingrich crowd in '94. So we're all united that we want to beat Rick Santorum, and I feel I can get Democrats and independents. A lot of those people say, I can't vote for you next Tuesday, but I'll vote for you in November. So I hope the Democrats will give me that opportunity, and then I'll win for the first time since 1962, because we haven't had a full-term Democratic U.S. Senator since '62, so they need a fresh face, someone that could win, and Bob Rovner's that person.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Rovner. Mrs. Allison Schwartz.
Hello. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here and to be at Millersville University. And it is important to Pennsylvanians for us to defeat Rick Santorum. And the reason it's important is because Rick Santorum has been very narrow, very right-wing, very extreme in his agenda, and he has not represented Pennsylvania families well in the United States Senate. So what I want to talk about is why it's so important to defeat Rick Santorum and replace him with a United States Senator who does understand the concerns of Pennsylvania families, particularly the concerns we have for quality education for our children, to make sure that we all have access to good health care for seniors, for our children, to make sure that we have economic opportunity across the states, that our young people stay in-state and have those job opportunities. That's true for my sons, who are 20 and 23. I want them to stay right here in Pennsylvania. And also, we have to be concerned about reducing gun violence. And in the private sector, for 10 years in the state Senate, I have been fighting special interests. I've been standing up for the issues of concern to Pennsylvania families. And Pennsylvanians want someone they know will go to Washington and fight for them and their interests. That's what I've done. That's what I will do. And that's what this race is really about. It's about electing a United States Senator who will really, truly represent our interests and concerns. And I'll do that.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Schwartz, sorry about that. And Mr. Murray Levin.
Thank you. I can practically guarantee that any one of the 6 fine candidates who have shown up tonight will beat Rick Santorum in the fall. We know that he has to be replaced and that he does not represent our aspirations. But I would say that I have the best chance one-on-one to beat Rick Santorum, and that for several reasons. I have been running as a citizen senator candidate. By that I mean I'm trying to bring 30 years as an advocate, 20 years of international experience, 20 years on the board of a major medical center, 10 years on the board of a school, 10 years on the board of a political think tank, and a very, very broad community involvement. I have been stressing the issues of participation, inclusion, and education all over the state, and I find a great resonance in this regard. I have more international experience with due regard than all of the folks here. I'm a fresh face. Everybody else here has run innumerable times, and I think, and I hope to demonstrate tonight, that I have the debating skills and presence to track down, defeat, and send Rick Santorum home. I would point out that in the last election when Santorum won, it was very close. It came down to the last week or two, and Santorum appeared to best the Democratic incumbent in the two debates. We can't let that happen again, and I'm the candidate that can make a difference.
Thank you very much, Mr. Levin, and indeed all of the candidates here tonight.
Yeah, well spoken, and they all sound like winners. So let's spend some money now, and not the kind where you have to buy TV ads. The economy's been doing pretty well, and whether you credit the Clinton administration or the dot-com economy or Alan Greenspan, somehow, some way, we've got things going pretty well. In fact, we've got budget surpluses. What are we going to do with these budget surpluses? And I've heard you guys talk about this, and obviously we've got to save Social Security, and how much are we going to cut taxes? And I don't want to sound like Regis saying, which order did the movies come out, A, B, or C? But I do want you to prioritize here. Tell me what's your top priority or second. I'm going to start with Phil Berg, because I've heard you say you want to give free prescriptions to all senior citizens. How much is that going to cost? Is that going to cut into that surplus?
It's probably going to cost a lot of money, but let's face it. Free prescriptions, it's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. Hopefully, we're all going to get old. We're the richest nation in the world. We help everyone else out. To help get the money, not only from the surplus, but what we have to do is we have to have campaign finance reform. Because what happens is people in Harrisburg and Washington, they don't really care what everyone out here thinks, because they're interested in who's lining their pockets. Granny D just walked across the United States, a 90-year-old woman. I joined her for the last 5-mile walk through from Arlington Cemetery to the Capitol, where she chastised senators. She needs 6 more votes, and I want to be one of those votes. Free prescription we can afford. We can take it out of money, and also one of the big ideas I've came up with during this campaign, which no one else will touch. The biggest problem facing our nation right now, facing every community, including this one here, is drugs. Drugs have infested our nation. And what we have to do is take the profits out of drugs. You want to get money back for free prescriptions? We spent $80 billion last year on the drugs. And what we have to do is we have to take the profits out by legalizing drugs and take the profits out and tax it, control, regulate, and dispense it. We will have plenty of money for prescriptions, shore up Social Security, a separate trust fund for Social Security, and money for Medicare.
And we may come back to that legalizing of drugs issue, but let me ask you, Mr. Klink, when you talk about budget surpluses, what's at the top of your list? Is it Social Security?
Well, first of all, when we first started to talk about budget surpluses, Scott, we didn't really have a surplus. What we were talking about initially was that there was extra Social Security money, and that money needed to be put back into Social Security. Just like the Highway Trust Fund and the Airport Trust Fund, the Social Security Trust Fund needs to be walled off. And that money needs to be there, dedicated strictly for Social Security. It needs not to be put into the stock market. It needs to be put into Treasury bonds, which are very conservative investment, and it will be there for generations to come. Beyond that, there are some investments that we can make that we actually get a return. For example, expansion of the WIC program, Women, Infants, and Children. We get about a $3 or $4 return for every dollar that we spend. Children are much more healthy because their mother had the nutrition when they were carrying, the child had nutrition in the formative months of their lives. Similarly, with Head Start, we can expand that program, and we get a great return of $5 to $6 per event. And the same thing with the prescription drug program, which I voted for. First of all, negotiating with the drug companies, the pharmaceutical firms, as the insurance companies do, we can bring down the prices of drugs dramatically. And then we can provide these drugs for our senior citizens. About 60% of the seniors now have a prescription drug benefit. So talk 35 or 40% that we have to fill in for. And the cost to society, whether it's in disproportionate share payments that are made to hospitals that take care of these senior citizens that don't have coverage, or other kinds of costs associated with Medicare, we're going to pay, it's the old Midas ad, pay me now or pay me later. We don't really have a choice. We're going to pay one way or the other. It makes more sense to give them the prescription benefit.
Bob Robner, Ron Klink went right to Social Security. Are you guys on the same page? Do you agree with his priority list?
Well, there's so many things I want to do. I want to help education, more teachers.
Education first.
My first would be shore up Social Security and Medicare. And I would tell you what we have to do along with that. We have to pay down the federal debt. For the first time since 1835, we could be debt-free. It'll take 13 years to do it. So by 2013, because right now, Scott, 15 cents of every dollar is spent just to pay interest payments. That's hundreds of billions of dollars a year so we could get the money for free prescription drugs. If a family earns over $50,000 a year, then there should be some kind of copay. But for families earning under $50,000, let's give them the free drugs. And I once worked on the lottery bill to give seniors the free tax rebates, the free transportation, the PACE program. So I was innovative once before. And Scott, you know, now families have to choose between food and drugs and the necessary health care. That is wrong. We're the richest country in the world. We have to supply the necessary health care. And we have to do so much for our seniors. So I say, and then with the money that we save, the hundreds of billions of dollars, we can help education. We can help clean up the environment. We can take special interest money out of politics. The president, when he came in '93, they had the largest deficit ever. Now we have the largest surplus. Let's not give a special corporate break like Santorum and the conservative Republicans wanted to do. Let's pass it on to the people in Medicare, Social Security, and paying down the debt.
All right, we're going to move right on. These guys have talked about their priorities. I haven't heard anybody talk about cutting taxes. Allison Schwartz, what's wrong with giving some of the money back?
I'll get there. We do have to first use the surplus for Social Security. And the proposals have been between 40 and 60% have to be dedicated of the surplus to Social Security, protect Social Security. It will be a major issue in the general election against Rick Santorum, who wants to privatize Social Security. I believe, and I think many of my colleagues up here, I can call them that actually, the other opponents, do want to spend the money to protect Social Security. That's my first priority. Next, we should use some of the money, it's about 15% of the surplus, to make sure that Medicare is secure. And that would include extending coverage for prescription benefits, which I believe strongly we should and can do. Then, if there's money, which I think there will be, we should spend the money to make sure that all of our children are covered. You know my work, I hope, on the Children's Health Insurance Program, helping working families in the state be able to buy private health insurance for their children, take the responsibility we want. In this country, it's now a federal program. Pennsylvania was a model. About half of the children in this country, about 5 million, could have health insurance. Well, there are another 6 million children out there whose parents want to be able to get them health care that they need. We should finish the job with a few of those extra dollars in the surplus. Then, if there's money left over, some of the people in Washington think that there will be, we should invest in education, and we should do targeted tax cuts. That means raising eligibility for the Earned Income Tax Credit, so our poorest working Americans keep some more of their money, and take care of some other very targeted kinds of tax cuts.
Targeted tax cuts, but again, down on the list for you. The Democrats are talking tax cut plans in the $300 billion range. Murray Levin, the Republicans are talking more, $800 billion. What's too much? What's not enough?
Well, Scott, let me, as you've requested, give you my 4 priorities for the surplus. I've examined the projections. I believe the surpluses are real. I think we're in for trillions of dollars over the next 10 years. I would use those dollars in the following 4 ways. First of all, I agree with my colleagues that we ought to do whatever it takes to protect, to lockbox, to shore up both Social Security and Medicare, and I do agree that we need to take some of that money and provide a badly needed prescription drug benefit. That's number 1. Number 2, we ought in an orderly way to begin paying down the accumulated national deficit. The projections, the President has asked us to do it in 13 years. I've seen things that say 13 to 15 years. This will give an immediate economic benefit throughout the society. It'll make money cheaper. It'll make money cheaper for mortgages. It'll make money cheaper for student loans. So number 2, pay down that debt in 13 to 15 years. Number 3, with a minimum of red tape, let's take the surplus and make block grants to local areas, to the Lancaster schools, to the Philadelphia schools, to the Allegheny schools, and let that money be used for bricks and mortars. Our public schools are aging, for computer education, including hard and software, and teachers, an absolute necessity if you're going to be educated in this 21st century, and most of all, for more teachers in the classroom. Every study shows that success is a function of small classes. So number 3, education. Then I get to your question of tax cut. The Bush proposal and the Republican congressional proposal of $900 billion over 10 years won't fly. It will rob us of the ability to do the other things that we need to do. You've heard the phrase, let's fix the roof when the sun is shining. Now is the time to do it. The figure that the President came up with last spring of $250 to $300 billion over 10 years makes sense, and it ought to be targeted to middle and lower class people. I do want to take on Mr. Berg, who said nobody would touch his issue. His issue is wrong-headed. It would be a mistake to legalize drugs. Rather than saving money, it will cause a net loss. We're going to have people drugged out. You'll be losing time from work, and it's a bad idea. It would not improve the economy.
All right, and we'll give you a chance, Mr. Berg, a little bit later. Right now, I want to get to Mr. Foley. And you're there, you're sitting there, you're elected, you're a U.S. Senator, and your leadership says, hey, what do we do with this extra money? What do you tell them?
First thing I do is make sure those are real dollars. And I think it was Mark Twain who said the problem with Washington is there's too many imaginary bean counters down there, and those surplus numbers have already changed significantly this year. So that's number one. I think Mary has the right priority on the list, but I would add a couple of caveats. After we shore up Social Security, we don't just need to plug the money into Medicare, we need to redesign Medicare. When Medicare was created, Lyndon Johnson was president 35 years ago, 80+% of medical care for our senior citizens was hospital-based invasive surgery. Now the ratios are reversed, and a great deal of our medical care is drug therapy-based out hospital. So we need to redesign that system, but we cannot stop there. If we just think we're going to play for that forever with Social Security or other surpluses, that's wrong. That's not going to happen. We have to figure out, looking at things like Tom Allen's bills, it's Senate Bill 731, which would allow us to group discount purchase for all Medicare recipients through the federal government. That's a way to keep those prices down long term. Third caveat I would add, when you pay down the debt, which I think is very important, right now, that's 1/3 of all our budget dollars every year is paying interest on the debt. Those are dollars we can't use for other things. We cannot simply pay it down. The President made the first down payment about a month ago. We have to target those dollars legislatively and not leave that to later processes. 1, infrastructure, 2, education, and 3rd, research and development that's geared to universities and high-tech consortiums. That's the way to grow jobs, and growing jobs is the best way to keep this economy growing and solve a lot of the other problems that we've been talking about.
Thank you all.
All right, we're going to move on now to gun control and violence, an important issue. We have a lot of important issues to get to tonight, so I want to remind all of you to keep your answers as concise as possible so we can cover more ground and let people know what you really stand for. And we're going to start this time with Ron Klink. Mr. Klink.
Let's put it in these terms. Let me ask you this. It has been 40 years, nearly, since a Democrat was elected to the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. People have said that gun control for Democrats in this issue may get you through the primary, but you're going to lose on gun control in November. Is that true?
Well, I don't know. That's the whole point is you have to, when you deal with gun control, or whether you're dealing with the economy, whether you're dealing with national defense, Scott, you can't make those decisions based on whether or not you're going to win the next election. You have to make those decisions based on whether or not it's sound policy, whether it's, in the case of guns, whether it's a sound and safe policy for the nation.
Now, Bob Rovner, you have some differences with Ron Klink on this gun issue. Does that make you a candidate that can win in November?
I think I can win in November. I'm supported by district attorneys, by law enforcement. I'm happy today because the firefighters of Philadelphia, 4,000, supported me. But they know I want to get guns. I'm for sportsmen. I'm for the right to bear arms. But I want to get guns out of the hands of criminals, out of the violent youth and deranged stalkers. And I would have voted for the Brady bill. I think the Brady bill was important. It kept 500,000 guns out of the hands of criminals. And unfortunately, Santorum is the poster boy for the NRA. He got hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he voted against the Brady bill. And one of my other opponents got money from the NRA and voted against the Brady bill. So I differ there. But I also would have voted for the crime bill to put 100,000 police on the streets, and Santorum voted against it. One of my other opponents voted against it also. But I'm for the safety latches. If we can have aspirin bottles with safety caps, you can certainly have guns with safety caps. There's nothing wrong with taking a trigger locks. Nothing wrong with having to take gun safety courses. You don't need, I'm for hunters, but you don't need automatic Uzis to hunt deer. So there's so many things, and I'm the only candidate that was a former prosecutor, so I feel strongly about getting guns out of the hands of the criminals, etc. And I say get money out of the hands of the people in office, the special interest, because then it looks bad if you take money from a special interest group and then you vote their way. It looks terrible. I will not accept money from the NRA or any special interest group because that is wrong, and and that hurts us, and it hurts the image of this U.S. Senate.
Allison Schwartz, have you taken money from the NRA? Would you take money from them, and what would you like to do? Would you like to tighten up gun control?
There's really almost no more important issue that I hear about as I go across Pennsylvania, and maybe it's really unfortunate that we all have to be so deeply concerned about gun violence in our communities, but we are. I've been talking with moms and dads across the state to talk with them about what their concerns are related to gun safety. And I hear mothers say to me that they never were worried about this. These are gun owners and those who've never owned a gun alike, who say to me they worry about their children going to school. They worry about, their senior citizen told me the other day she worries about leaving her apartment to go to the store. We worry about gun violence in our communities like we never did before. And what I hear from moms and dads particularly, that they want politicians in Washington, politicians in Harrisburg, to do something about this, to stand up to the NRA, to pass common sense gun safety laws, so we don't have to worry about our children being confronted with a gun at school. That's what's happening today. So it is different than 30 years ago, and it's not the kind of difference we want. But they're demanding, rightfully, that we have a United States Senator who will stand up for our children and for gun safety. I am the only one who has stood up to the NRA. I'm the only one who's taken them on and has said that this nation's children are more important than the NRA leadership, their money, or the clout they might use against me. And I'm willing to do that, and I think Pennsylvania parents and grandparents know that I'm the one they can count on to stand up against the NRA and to fight for gun safety and reducing gun violence in all of our communities.
You know, opening day of deer season, and there are enough people out in the woods to elect a couple of congressional representatives. There are a lot of people in this state that love to hunt, and they like their guns, and they're law-abiding. Should they be worried about your gun plan, Mary Levin?
Let me answer
No,
that.
I don't think so.
If I may,
back to
let me
you
just
in a
answer that, if I may, because I think you're setting up, you'll get a chance, but let me just answer it if I may.
Okay, give me 15 seconds.
Okay, hunters understand very clearly this is not law-abiding citizens who hunt. I have no objection to law-abiding citizens who hunt, who own guns safely and responsibly. This is about keeping guns out of the hands of criminals and away from children. And hunters and others who don't hunt agree with that.
Wait a minute.
We're going to get around to you, Phil. Murray Levin, it's your turn on this issue. You know the fears, the worries of those gun owners that you start taking one step and then it's going to be another.
I think the gun safety issue is somewhat emblematic of one of the problems in politics today. For myself, I favor a lot of common sense gun safety measures.
What does
favor
common sense mean?
Child locks, as was said before. If we can put safety caps on aspirin bottles, we can certainly have a child lock on a gun. I favor smart gun technology, which is in the works, and I would favor some federal support to speed it along. I favor closing gun show loopholes. But I don't think that the way to accomplish gun safety, and after all, since Columbine, we're a year out from that, we've had too many other repetitive tragedies. Not a single law has been passed either in Washington or Harrisburg. I see an issue where people are standing on opposite side of a fence. Some are yelling common sense gun safety, some are yelling the Second Amendment and enforce laws on the books. I agree with the Second Amendment. I revere the entire Bill of Rights. It's not an absolute right. It's not a right to have an Uzi. It's not a right to have banana clips in your house, but it is a right that needs to be respected. I also am in accord with the idea of let's enforce those laws that are on the books. I note that the President has included an addition in the budget proposal for the AFT to do a better job of enforcing the laws. In fact, in San Diego, where there has been a concerted effort to enforce the laws, statistically, gun violence is going down. My final bottom line is that people on both sides of this issue have a common area of agreement. We want to reduce child violence. We want to reduce gun violence. We want to have safer schools. We want to put an end to accidental gun deaths. It doesn't do a good to have people screaming across the fence. I say let's lower our voices. I can stand up to anybody else and make the points I wish to make, but I also want to reach out and see if we can't move. I'll be a citizen senator who will take a 50% gun law this year and will go back next year instead of a year in and year out with no law.
There are those who say there are already plenty of laws on the books, they're just not being enforced.
There are laws on the books, Janelle, that we can enforce better. I think we need to recognize two things in whole. That a gun in the hand of a hunter or a farmer is a tool. It's not a weapon. At the same time, we need to recognize that last year in this country we had 35,000 people die because of handgun violence. I lived in Belfast, Northern Ireland for 2 years, in the worst years of the Troubles, at the front lines of the peace movement there. And in my time living there, my chances of dying by an act of violence were still greater if I lived in the average American city than living in Belfast, Northern Ireland. That's shocking to people. That means we need to do at least 3 things immediately. One is children's safety locks. 2 is we can do more on automatic weapons, banana clips, and those sorts of things. And 3, close the gun show loophole. We know in Columbine, the woman who bought those guns, if they'd started a background check, would have backed off. Doesn't mean the tragedy would have stopped. Now, if I stop there and I just give you that list, Janelle, I'm just a typical politician, because that's what everybody does. We've got a list. The question is, how do you get there? You don't get there by giving speeches. You don't get there by holding press conferences. You get there by working hard on legislation, whether you're in Washington or in Harrisburg. And I think Murray hits the key point. We could not pass anything in Washington or in Harrisburg after Columbine because we have people at 2 ends of the spectrum yelling at each other and trying to get people together on 3 things we all agree on. Criminals shouldn't have guns, children shouldn't have access to guns, and mentally defective people shouldn't be able to get guns. There's common ground there. We need to bring people together on those things.
And Phil Berg, you're going to have the final word on this. You're a lifetime member of the NRA. You're keeping that card.
That's right, and I just received an A rating on the questionnaire that was sent out to all 6 candidates here. And it just was endorsed by Firearms Owners Against Crime. And I've been talking to a new group called Second Amendment Sisters. We have a gun problem in this country, but we get back to Phil Berg, the people's candidate, the common sense candidate, okay? I'm an attorney. Most of my practice personal injury, about 25% is criminal. The first thing I do as an attorney is I contact the assistant district attorney and to try to plea bargain the case. They like a plea bargain because they get a guilty, their statistics look better. We look well because we get our client with a lesser sentence. There should be no plea bargaining with anyone who used a gun in the commission of a crime. Mandatory minimum, it's 5 years in Pennsylvania. It's not enforced. It should be enforced, but it should be increased. It should be 20 years. When someone picks up a gun to use it, they should know, bye-bye, they're going away. Put them in jail. Now, 99% of gun owners in Pennsylvania and throughout the nation are law-abiding citizens. When you hear someone is arrested for a murder or a robbery, you don't hear they're a member of the NRA. You know, get real what's going on here. Senator Schwartz talks about she's for gun safety, gun safety. I'm going to ask her again tonight if she'll apologize. They asked her last night and she refused. She invites Jane Fonda, Hanoi Jane, in, who sits on a howitzer with guns faced at our troops in South Vietnam. Will you apologize again for that statement? I doubt it, but you'll get a chance on that because you won't do it. And the thing is, we have to look at a common sense approach on guns. Now, look at it, the trigger lock situation in Michigan. If there had been a requirement for a trigger lock, that 6-year-old young girl would probably still be dead because do you think there would have been trigger lock on that gun when that boy lived in a drug-infested house? And the next day in Philadelphia, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, some would-be robbers came in to rob. Carpenters wrestled the guns away and shot and killed the would-be robbers with the guns. So be careful on smart guns. Police don't want smart guns. If an officer drops down and can't, and the other
these are guns that don't fire if they drop out of your gun. And we appreciate that point. We're going to have to wrap up this part of it if we're going to get to our audience questions.
Before we do that, I just wanted to ask though, Allison Schwartz, Phil Berg.
Oh, if I have an opportunity to answer, I'd like to make just two quick comments on the issue that Phil has brought up several times now, and I did answer it last night, and I'm happy to answer it every time he brings it up, and that is what he is really saying about this invitation my campaign gave to Jane Fonda, which I stopped, or she did not come in for me. What he's really saying is that I don't have any respect for veterans, that I'm not patriotic.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying, will you apologize to 1.3 million veterans in Pennsylvania who you insulted by inviting Jane Fonda in? If she'd come in today, would you appear with her? I think you would.
Let me answer the question this way, and I think this is what he is saying. My father was a veteran. He was away from the time I was 3 years old to the time I was 5. The answer to the question he's raising is, do I have respect for veterans or not? And the answer is, I do. And when I stopped
This
you know,
is the
Jane
problem
Fonda
with
coming in.
politicians. They
So
won't answer
I think we should put it
questions.
aside.
She talks out both sides of her mouth. She
Let's
didn't
move
answer
on.
the
There are
question.
other issues.
There are a number of other issues. There indeed.
Thank you both. Well, coming up later in the hour, we will be taking, we're not going to hog all the time, we'll be taking questions from the audience and from the students here at Millersville University as
And
well.
we've had some coming in from email as well. So while Janelle and I go to sort through all of those questions, we're going to turn things over to Dr. Madonna, and it's all yours, sir.
Thank you. With all the rhetoric that we hear out of the campaign, you folks are really much more similar than you are different. Obviously, what you're trying to do before Pennsylvania voters is draw distinctions, and so the biggest distinctions clearly exist on the so-called cultural and social issues. I think you would agree. Let's stick with guns for a moment, Mr. Rovner. Let's go to maybe a slightly more extreme position that some gun control folks advocate. The former mayor of the city of Philadelphia, Ed Rendell, who's now your party chair, suggested that, and he did a great deal of research, that in fact, cities ought to be able to sue gun manufacturers using the same constitutional theories that the tobacco litigants used against the tobacco companies. In fact, would you support, or do you think that a smart federal strategy ought to be to have government sue gun manufacturers?
Terry, the answer is definitely yes. My friend Ed Rendell, and by the way, we have a lot in common. We both graduated high school in '61, college '65, law school '68. He spoke out for me at a couple of fundraisers, and the mayor was absolutely right, and the proof is in the pudding, Terry, because that shows, before I talked about special interest money in politics, one of the reasons I'm very turned off by Governor Bush in Texas, because he gave immunity to the gun manufacturers, meaning that no city in Texas could sue them. And you know what? In Pennsylvania, they did the same thing. It was a disgrace. But to prove that Ed Rendell, and we were assistant DAs together, and that he was right, Smith & Wesson only agreed last week that they'll have 2% of their gross profits go for smart gun legislation, which, even though my friend Phil Berg is against, I'm for, because I think it's good that if children or a burglar takes a gun, you can't shoot it unless the owner has the gun for fingerprint and thumbprint. They agreed to have the trigger locks, and they agreed, but if there was no pressure from the federal government or those 26 cities that sued, including Detroit and Miami and Chicago, they never would have agreed, just like the tobacco cases.
Hey, Terry,
I want to tell you,
let
me just finish. No tobacco company admitted that tobacco was bad for your health until they got sued.
But in fact, Ed Rendell did not go ahead with that lawsuit.
He did?
He did not.
But the legislature was wrong for giving the immunity to the manufacturers. Go ahead.
As you may know, Terry, I did argue this on the floor of the Senate, and I argued vehemently that we should not give immunity to the gun manufacturers. Now, I don't always believe in litigation. I'm not sure it's always the best strategy, but it is a strategy that sometimes brings the players to the table and sometimes brings attention to an issue. 28 cities across this country had sued the gun manufacturers. The president was relentless, I have to say. Unlike what has been suggested here, is that being relentless was somehow suggested as being one-sided. It's not true. What it's going to take is bringing those gun manufacturers to the table and making them, in some cases, mandating that they do some of the things that Smith & Wesson has agreed to. It was wrong to give them immunity. I argued that on the floor of the Senate, and one of the things that I said to my other senators, the other senators who were there, is, I said, how can you pass a law that protects gun manufacturers rather than trying to do all we can to protect children? That in fact, let me just say, we have fewer laws, again, that regulate real guns, that regulate toy guns. If we had some of the injuries that happen from real guns happen to toy guns, you would have the FDA step in a minute and recall those guns and demand, changes on those toy guns. And we don't do the same for gun manufacturers. We need to make sure that we hold gun manufacturers responsible for their part in producing safe products and any part they might play in gun violence. I've made that argument. I'll continue to make that argument.
Terry, first of all, I don't agree with the premise of your question. I do have some policy differences, certainly on abortion and certainly on gun control. But the principal difference that I am offering as a citizen senator is someone bringing a new perspective. I'm offering a background of education, of life experience, of analytic ability and advocacy skills, which is going to make a difference in Washington. Anyone can stand up and say, I'm for this or I'm for that. People know where I stand and what I stand for, but they also know that I'm the kind of a person that will will represent Pennsylvania as a leader in the Senate. To get to your question, I do agree with the strategy of suing the gun companies. I think it proved itself in practice. We had the breakthrough with Smith & Wesson. They have agreed not only to the child safety locks on all of their guns, they have agreed to very wide-ranging restrictions on background data before sales are made. And they've even agreed to do it with their own companies. So I think that it is a project. I applaud the government. I think the President did a good job, and I support it. Thank you.
A couple of Mr. Foley, go ahead.
Let me tell you what I think Rick Santorum would do with your question, Terry. I think what he'd tell you is, yeah, let him, Rick Santorum, sue, get some money, and not let anybody else sue on that. Because that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did when he sued a chiropractor for medical damages. He got a $350,000 judgment, which is his American right to do. And then 2 months before he did that, when everybody else had that opportunity, he voted to deny it. That's what we're all up here about. We're all in broad agreement on the gun issue. The issue is, how do we remove him from the platter? And the only way to do that is to put somebody who can get in there and actually get things done. We had a story in the Lancaster paper today about a shootout with the police. We had a story today in the Lebanon paper about a woman in a car, in a shootout, injured, having nothing to do with it. And the front page story in the Harrisburg paper is a 9-month-old infant in the backseat of a car, injured in a drive-by shooting. It's too late for speeches and talk and debates on the floor of the Senate or the floor of the House. It's time for putting people in there who can work with the parties on the things we agree on. Keep the guns away from criminals, keep the guns out of the hands of kids, and keep the guns out of the hands of mentally defective people.
Mr. Berg, and then we'll go to Mr. Coyne.
Real quick. We shouldn't be able to sue gun manufacturers just because they make a gun. I mean, what are we doing in this country? I mean, it's wrong. You can sue a gun manufacturer if there's product liability, if there's something wrong. There's other, as the other candidates up here said, to sue, it's wrong. It's like to be able to sue a car manufacturer because they built a car, wrong. Our legal system has progressed. Excuse me. No, you're not.
Yes,
no, we're not assuming liability. The lawsuits that have been allowed are without liability, just to sue, and that's wrong.
They'll be thrown out.
Well, that's right. It's the way we spend millions of dollars in our court system, but the legislation that has been permitted and been promoted by politicians to sound good is just be able to sue. We've always been able to sue gun manufacturers. It's defective. This other nonsensical suits are wrong. We all know we need safety measures. The NRA has spent more money on safety and education than anyone else. We have to stop this two ends of the spectrum, and we need the common sense candidate to get down to the table.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm a legislator, not a litigator. And whether or not these suits have merit, I would have to take a deeper look at it. I can't sit here today and tell you that I know for sure that they should or shouldn't move forward. But let me just take on Ms. Schwartz on one issue. She says she's the only candidate here who's taken on the NRA. You may be surprised, Allison, I've taken them on. When I voted for the 72-hour waiting period to close the gun show loopholes, they were livid. They stood outside the Capitol. They were upset. They were in my office. They didn't like that. That was not something that the NRA wanted to see happen. They are not happy about the gun trigger locks, which I voted for. So I've gone against them when I thought they were wrong, and I've voted with them when I thought they were right. The reality here is that we can't just be divisive, and we can't just look at the issue of guns. For example, the shooting that took place up in Michigan with a 6-year-old. What in the world was a 6-year-old child doing in a crack house? Where were the social service agencies? Where were the police officers? Where were the teachers? The shooting that took place in Wilkinsburg. This was somebody that belonged in a mental institution. Why was this person not receiving mental care? Why was he out on the street? Why was he able to steal a gun? And the same thing with the person who came in the United States Capitol 2 years ago and shot officers Gibson and Chestnut. Should have been in a mental institution. His parents said they knew it. They tried to get him put in a mental institution. But the way the insurance companies work today, you can maybe get 3 days of psychiatric care and you're back out on the street. This is not just a gun issue. There are a lot of other issues that relate to this that we have not taken on.
Okay, we only have a couple minutes here. I'm going to set a scenario, and I want a quick answer, a yes or no if it's possible. With political people, it's probably not possible. Let me try this. Let me try this.
Well, cut us off.
Okay, you are elected to the United States Senate. You are a sitting senator. The next president of the United States is going to send up 3 or 4 names for nomination to the United States Supreme Court. The names are before you. This question goes to Mrs. Schwartz first. Everything about the candidate is A-OK with you except you find out the candidate, in this case, is 100% opposed to capital punishment. Do you vote to confirm?
Well, I think we have to look at the judges and want a yes or no answer. No
thing-
way, no way.
All things being even,
It's never all things being even. It is always
you would
looking
vote
at the...
except for this issue, up or down. Up or down, the person's
We have
qualified.
to, the person has to be
opposed.
willing to uphold the law. That has to be
All right.
what they have to
Yes
do.
or no?
I
As well as
revere the
the-
Supreme Court too much to make a judgment like that, other than to say that I will not have a litmus test. I will evaluate every nominee based on a whole series of qualifications,
Well, you got a yes and
their
no, too.
ability to provide
Okay, that's
justice.
it.
I
Mr.
did this
Foley?
in the Judiciary Committee staff, Terry. If they have the temperament, they have the intellect, and they have the experience, I would vote for them.
Mr. Berg.
I would vote against it. I'm for the death penalty, and I would vote against.
I do not have litmus tests, and I am also not a one-issue voter.
And I do not have litmus tests. I'm supported by the prosecutors, but it doesn't mean I would not vote for them or against them. I'd have to check every
Mr.
issue.
Levin, I'm going to a tough one now.
I'm for the death penalty
It has to-
also.
all things being even, person's well qualified, looks good, everything's up. You learn that the person would in fact strike down Roe v. Wade, although it's not technically the law of the land, but in effect would vote, in a sense, for the pro-life position. Without getting in a debate about what that means, up or down, yes or no, would you vote to confirm?
I would not vote to confirm because I think a person who would vote to overturn Roe v. Wade would not have the kind of judicial judgment that I'm looking for in a Supreme Court justice.
That happened with Bork. He didn't have the temperament, but it comes down to those three issues. If it's a non-Bork who has those three qualities, that there should be no litmus test.
Mr.
I
Berg.
would vote against.
Mr. Queen.
Obviously, I'd vote for.
I'd vote against.
Thank you.
And-
Scott, Janelle?
Maybe everyone assumes they know my answer.
Thank you,
Wow,
Dr.
we got a lot of answers. Thank you, guys. Now, we've sorted through a good number of emails. I'm going to draw a theme from some of these because I walked around the campus here today, and they got some sharp students here at Millersville. One of the things I'd like to ask you, we've talked about this a lot in Pittsburgh. Kids in their 20s, 30s, leaving. Philadelphia Inquirer just did the same story last week. People in their 20s and 30s getting out of Philadelphia. I lived a good part of my 20s in Erie, loved it. Lived my 30s in Pittsburgh, love it. But what's wrong? Is Pennsylvania not hip enough? Let me go right to Murray Levin on this one first.
Scott, we are 48th in the creation of new jobs, and we are second from the bottom in keeping our graduates from CMU and Pittsburgh and Duquesne, the universities you're talking about. The way to change that is to create the high-tech, high-skilled, high-paying jobs that will keep and attract our people. We also have a tax problem. We have an out-of-whack local, state, and federal tax system. And as a senator, I will work to make Pennsylvania a more attractive venue for businesses to come. Let's keep our young people. It's a great state.
Okay, this one goes down the line. Would you, if you were in the U.S. Senate, have voted to impeach President Clinton? Tom Foley.
No, I would not. No, I would not. That was, in my opinion, everybody already knew what was going on that issue. We didn't need to waste all of that time in the Senate. People had already formed their points of view. And as we know, there was no end result or effect from that whole process.
Thank you very much. Mr. Berg.
I would not have voted to impeach. I would have tried to end it much earlier at my own expense. I ran a nationwide website, www.votepower.com. I think what the Republican Party did was a total disgrace. They dumped pornography on the internet. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Okay.
And that's my position.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berg. Mr. Klink.
I was in the Congress. I had to cast the vote. I had to take part in the debate. I was embarrassed at the president's behavior, but there was not a constitutional crisis until it was created by the Republican Party.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Roberts.
the right answer to this question is the Senate doesn't vote to impeach, the House does. And the question should be, if you would you have voted, thank you, would you have voted to convict? And one of the reasons I am running for U.S. Senate, not only would I have not have voted to convict because he didn't do something that was an impeachable offense, but the whole focus of the nation, instead of going for a patient's Bill of Rights, instead of paying down the debt, instead of helping the environment, they were focusing on this conviction. Specter, the other Republican, the other senator, voted the right way. Santorum kept saying he was going to keep an open mind. Meanwhile, he voted with Trent Lott, Newt
Okay,
Gingrich
we're gonna move on,
crowd to
Mr.
convict,
Rodner.
and that
Thank
was
you
a
very much.
disgrace.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Schwartz.
I would also not have voted to convict or to impeach, but let me say, as a woman and as a mother, I was outraged at the president's behavior, and it was embarrassing for many of us to have to talk about some of these issues with our children, with relatives, and certainly I think I was personally appalled at his behavior.
Thank you very much.
One
Mr.
of the
Lewin.
reasons I'm running is I think Congress should do the people's business. We spent a year investigating the president's behavior, which was outrageous. We spent 2 days on the comprehensive test ban treaty. We are out of whack. Of course, I would not have voted either to impeach or to convict for the simple reason that it was not an impeachable offense.
Thank you very much, sir. And we apologize to the audience. We have 1 minute left.
I got 1 minute left, but I got a question you can answer in 1 minute. David from Erie asked, we learned about you by your heroes. Who's your model as the ideal U.S. Senator? Let's go this way and end up down at this end, Murray.
I like Senator Lieberman and Senator Feingold.
Look, I'm looking to change the world. There are not enough senators that look like me, so I'm sorry I can't pick one.
Joe Biden's my friend. Arlen Specter's my friend. He votes the opposite of Santorum. He voted against the special interest tax. He voted for the crime bill. He voted for the nuclear test ban treaty that Santorum voted against it. So even though he's the same party, he votes the right way on most of the issues.
Thank you.
I am very envious of Robert Byrd of West Virginia. He has been very effective. I like Joe Biden, and I like Byron Dorgan.
Senator Feingold, we need campaign finance reform. I walked with him, with Granny D, and that's the one.
Thank you.
Bill Bradley, thoughtful, didn't win the presidential primary, but effective for many years. Dianne Feinstein as well.
Were you backing Bill Bradley for president?
I'm running for this office. You can't back anybody. But Michelle and I have a favorite picture of ourselves, our hands on a basketball. Michelle was 7 months pregnant with a guy who's now 12 years old, so I'm a big fan of his.
Well, that is all the time we have for questions. Thank you all very much. We're now going to go to closing statements. You will each have 1 minute.
And we're not trying to give you whiplash going back and forth like this, but you got to keep to the 1 minute or Terry Madonna's going to be mad. Tom Foley, you're first.
Thank you very much. First, thanks everybody for coming out here tonight at Millersville. Thanks to Janelle and Scott for the time they put into this. This is a terrific forum, and we're happy for that opportunity. Paul Zonga said a long time ago that the problem with politics and politicians is they're all too often about ambition and not enough about purpose. The purpose here is very clear. It is to remove somebody from office who does not understand that the minimum wage is a family value, who does not understand that a parent choosing which doctor their child should see is a family value, who does not understand that cleaning up toxic wastes is a family value, who does not understand that investing in education and schools that can properly educate our children so that they're prepared for this complex world is a family value. I've had a chance to work in a factory. I've had a chance to teach and coach kids from 6 years to 21 years of age. I've had a chance to balance the $3 billion budget and cure a deficit. I've had a chance to work overseas on peace missions and work in this country on job issues. I feel strongly that I'm the candidate to beat Santorum. Thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berg.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure being here this evening. As I said, am the people's candidate, and I am different than these other candidates. Check my website, www.berg2000.com, because I have identified issues that can affect all of you. For the elderly, free prescriptions I mentioned. I mentioned should be, for the elderly, it should be a federal crime for the abuse of patients in nursing homes. We should shore up Social Security. I mentioned that. Medical choices. You should have the choice of the doctor of your choice or the medical provider of your choice. We got to talk real issues here. Cap the interest rates on credit cards. It's a disgrace what goes on. It should be 3% above prime, not 29% in Pennsylvania with a legal rate at 6%. I'm a former Deputy Attorney General of Pennsylvania. I'm a volunteer fireman. 19 years, I'm a lieutenant. I'm a founding board member of the Wellness Community, which is cancer patients fighting for recovery. I am the person best able to go in Rick Santorum's face because we'll never have the money. I call him the flower child of the Republican Party. He's a right-wing radical. Phil Berg is the only candidate who can beat him.
Thank you, sir. Ron Clegg, live and statewide, it's your minute.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I was a television broadcaster and radio broadcaster for 24 years. I got around Pennsylvania a lot. I know I'm not very well known here, but in 1992 I walked away from that job to go to the United States Congress because a lot of things were wrong. And I took a very tough vote back in 1993 to balance the federal budget, or we wouldn't even be talking about investing in education or paying off the debt or what we're going to do about Social Security and Medicare. I was there. I fought the fight. I took the tough votes. And I take them every day. And most of my votes are opposite of Rick Santorum's. When he voted against WIC and Head Start and Pell Grants and school lunches, Congressman Ron Klink was there voting the opposite way, and we won. So the whole idea is that we can stand up, we can make a difference. When the Republicans refused to talk about a real patient's Bill of Rights, I came back to Pennsylvania and held over 60 hours of hearings. Those hearings resulted in what is now the patient's Bill of Rights and the fact that we know that we need to have control of our health care, not the insurance companies and the HMOs.
All right,
Thank you very much, Mr. Klink. Mr. Rovner.
I thank you for the opportunity to have this debate, and I also invite everyone to look at my website, rovner2000.org. But most important, I'm different than the other candidates, and that I've always been a fighter, and I want to fight for you and your families and your children and your grandchildren. I'm the only candidate that is a grandfather. I'm the only candidate that was a prosecutor, and I'm unique from the other candidates in that I ran a business, a successful business, employing 60 families in Pennsylvania. And you know, you asked about the heroes before. Harry Truman was my hero. You know why? The pollsters said he was going to lose, but he didn't stop fighting, and he won. I want you to go out to vote on Tuesday, and I want you to prove those pollsters wrong, and I want you to prove those reporters who write about tiers of candidates that they're wrong. They didn't write that I was endorsed by the firefighters. They didn't write that I had the medical providers, the doctors, and they don't write a lot of things. So I need you, the people, not the politicians, to come out and vote for Bob Rovner, because I will beat Rick Santorum in November. I was a poor kid, I'm a union man. I need your help. Come vote on Tuesday. Thank you.
Allison Schwartz, your turn.
Thank you. As mother, senator, I have traveled across the state and I've talked with parents across Pennsylvania. And I understand that we have some dreams for our children across Pennsylvania. And we want and deserve a United States Senator who understands our concerns as parents and our goals. We want to assure quality education for our children. We want to make sure that we have good health care for our children and for our elderly parents. We want to make sure there's economic opportunity for our young people in the state, and we want to make sure that we have safe communities for fun ones. We want parents. That's what we deserve from a United States Senator. That's the kind of work that I've done. I've stood up to the special interests. I've stood up to sometimes the other politicians and said, we've got to do the right thing. We have to care more about our nation's children. That's what I'll do. I'll fight for our children. I'll fight for our families in Washington.
Thank you. Mr. Levin.
I know that many of you are undecided. You want to make up your own mind and do better than one politician running for just one more office. Abortion and gun safety are important issues, but there are other important issues as well. Family dairy farms are hurting across the state. Our veterans are not well tended by the VA. Child daycare is a very big problem for many families. We need real reform. You should make medical decisions. We need to have a new prescription benefit. Your children deserve smaller classes, and we have to protect Social Security. We can get reform by sending people to Washington who are not part of the old system and are not beholden to the special interest. I will have only one interest in mind in Washington, and that will be your interest, the interest of the people of Pennsylvania. I'd like you to look at my website. It's levin.com.
And that's going to be the last word. We're down to the last second. What an age of websites and candidates. We thank you. We're down to just a couple of seconds. We thank all candidates. Thank you, Terry Madonna, and everybody here at Millersville.
And most importantly, thank you to the viewers. Get out next Tuesday. The polls are open from AM to PM. Thank you, and good night from Millersville University.
Thank you. Good job.